Hi, welcome to another episode of Fractional Futures, where we're exploring how fractional CMOs help SMEs and portfolio companies accelerate growth and maximize enterprise value. Today, we're discussing one of the most exciting but complex aspects of scaling a business. That's international expansion. So, reaching new markets, it presents a huge opportunity for growth, but it also comes with significant challenges, from adapting marketing strategies to different cultures to overcoming entry barriers and maintaining brand consistency across multiple regions. In this episode, we'll explore how businesses can navigate these challenges and use marketing as an enabler for global growth. Joining me in this episode is Rob Nicholls, a strategic CFO, non-exec director, and board advisor with over 35 years of global finance experience. Rob specializes in profit maximization and value creation. And today he'll be sharing his insights on how CFOs and CMOs can work together to ensure international expansion is both strategic and financially viable. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Good to see you, Paul. Yeah, very well indeed.
Are you cleaning down your golf bats, ready for another round soon?
The golf bats are going to be well used this weekend, actually, in the next week or so. Yeah, the weather's improving, so we're getting out more. So that's all good.
I want to talk. I think this first topic I'd like to explore is how you can adapt your marketing strategy for new markets. Um, there will become an inflection point at some stage in the business growth cycle where the only the only option for growth is to go international. And expanding into new international markets, it isn't as simple as replicating what works at home. So cultural, economic, and regulatory differences, they require businesses to adapt their marketing strategies to resonate with the local audience. I want to explore how we can strike the right balance between local customization and brand consistency. So, Rob, I know you've worked internationally for many, many years. From a financial perspective, how should a business approach market entry? What factors should a CFO and a CMO consider when deciding how much to localize the marketing strategy versus maintaining the standardized approach?
Well, this is a great topic as well because it's very apropos right now with the sort of the move away from Europe and British businesses looking at other markets, whether it's Asia, North America, the Middle East, and it's something that I've been playing in for 30 odd years as well. I used to when I early days I was running the Middle East and Africa for a global technology firm, so I know this world very well, and then spent 2 decades in North America, living and working in the US as well. So I think it's very apropos. It staggers me as a nation, an international nation like Britain, that more businesses are not selling or exporting into other markets. Um, Way back when I took a product that basically was a standardized product and took it into 69 countries in the Middle East and Africa, grew distribution through all manner of different processes and practices. And we took a business that went from 20 million to 120 million in about 3 years. It wasn't difficult to do, but you learn an awful lot. And your point is well taken about how do you take a product, a standardized product, and moving into markets? I'm a big believer in strategic alliances, partnerships, building relationships with distribution points of presence in certain markets. And you have to go one market at a time. You go into Egypt, you need one, two, three distributors. You go into Kenya, you need one, two, three distributors. You do the same thing in South Africa. And over time, you play the market game that way. I think there's a very deliberate strategy you should apply in any market is you go after the big markets first. So I do a lot of work with companies moving into North America. And dependent on the product or the service or where you're going, and the way you want to uh, enter that market is the obvious markets for certain products are if you're in oil and gas, you want to look at California and Texas. If you're in hospitality, you want to look at Florida and California. If you're in medtech, you want to look at Connecticut, Massachusetts, and California. So you have to pick your markets, and I think that's one of the first things that I tend to work with companies on is pick the right markets before you even start thinking about legal entity structures. Is it a distribution strategy? Do we need to set up a legal entity? Do we need to manufacture in country? With the current US administration putting tariffs on an awful lot of things, we need to be very cognizant of that as well. A lot of people front ran the whole tariff debacle that's going on right now by importing an awful lot of product into the country in January. So as a result of that, you're going to get a major tail off in April, May, June, where there's not a lot of economic exporting activity as well. So there is people that are playing this game very quickly, very rapidly. I was sat down last night with a client around the dinner table, and she's just come back from a trip selling British products into the Middle East, into one country, Dubai, because it's easier. And the next step is, well, how do we take it from the Emirates, the same product, and move it into other markets? She's looking particularly, obviously, at places like Saudi. Um, Great product, great brand, not creating any new brands, just taking the existing brand that is available on the shelves in the UK and putting it into a new market, not doing anything fancy. But the key factor she's found, and I found 25, 30 years ago, was the points of presence. It's partnering with the right people at the right time, finding people that are invested in your product, that understand your product, that can talk to your product with their end clients as well. And what we found, we generally went with 2 or 3 distributors or dealers in country, found the best one, and then took away the one that wasn't performing and really doubled down, or actually, in some instances, acquired the best distributors in that country. And it takes a period of time, it takes years in many respects, but it's not difficult to do. And I struggle mightily with the fact that most businesses aren't doing it today. There's not a lot of support out there. The DBT, the Department of Trade and Industry, they talk a good game, and on the ground in country they will often talk a good game, and they'll invite you to various cocktail drinks, and they'll introduce you to people. But there's not a lot of systematized processes, templated ways of doing business. It's about getting out there, meeting people, building relationships, reinforcing those relationships, going out there again, getting boots on the ground. I'm a big believer in getting people into the country. So most of my clients that work into places like in North America, I will advise them to go out and spend 6 weeks, rent an Airbnb, and go and live in California, go and live in Miami, go and live in Houston, and become part of the business fabric for a period of time. Go to the universities, go to the chambers of commerce, meet the right people, build the right relationships, because it will open so many doors over time. Don't just try and ship your product in, clear it through customs, and try and find someone to put your product on the shelf. Build relationships. It's not difficult to do, but you do have to invest time and effort in doing that. Most people don't do that. So my advice would be the one that does invest in those relationships, that builds a point of presence in the country, get people to feel warm and cozy about your product, your service, like them. You need to like, know, and trust them. They need to believe in your product, and they need to, and you need, there's a certain amount of trust that has to be built up, and that will take time. It's the relationship that is the key thing.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't think there's much more I can add to that. I think you've pretty much covered all the important points there. I think with remote working, that there is no excuse to put one of your employees in another country for a few weeks, a few months, work remotely, get to everything that you've just mentioned there about embedding yourself in that local market, understanding who the movers and shakers are, who's the safest bet to be a potential distributor, all that good stuff, and picking up on the cultural nuances of that market as well.
I think your point is well taken. There's no excuse. With the ability using AI to develop a research report on a market, a country, a product, a distributor, you could literally do it on the aircraft flying to Dubai, generate half a dozen research reports by product, by region, by customer, do the due diligence on the partners you're looking at. There's no excuse. I know founders that will literally fly to California, they'll live in San Diego or San Francisco for 6 weeks in an Airbnb, and they'll do their due diligence. They'll find the right people to talk to. You just need to get off your backside and go to Dubai, do the due diligence, meet people, build a presence, build a personal brand, make sure that people know you're out there as well. I had one person I deal with, he's an FX broker out of London, took himself off to Dubai for 4 weeks. And now he's really quite well connected in Dubai. He's got a number of clients in Dubai. Well, then that starts resonating with other emirates in the region. So he's picking up clients in Qatar and Bahrain. That's through just getting off your backside and going out there. I've got another client who's in the special effects world, and next week I think is South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. He went out to that, spent a couple of weeks out in Austin, Texas, and already now we've actually got a distribution point in Texas, big market, big opportunity. But if you're a founder, you've got to be able to willing to get out there. Don't say I'm going to go to the US. That's not a strategy. Go to California, go to Texas, go to Dubai, pick a market and make an effort on that and get on the ground. That's my message, if you will.
I think the other thing to consider is the digital infrastructure that has to be localized as well. So, if, for example, you're exporting to China, WeChat might be a viable platform for your business to be on. If it's in India, I think it's UPI, Klarna in parts of Europe. And I think that's another thing you need to look at. How do the buyers or the potential buyers of your products, how do they buy the products? What platforms are they using? What systems, processes, techniques are they using? Because you need to adapt your tech strategy accordingly.
Right, you're absolutely right.
I want to move on, which is building a global brand and maintaining consistency while appealing to an even more diverse audience. Both you and I know, Rob, having a strong global brand, it helps businesses expand into those new markets, win credibility, win trust. But maintaining brands is more difficult when you're going into multiple new markets. So, Rob, many CFOs are focused on the ROI of brand building activities, especially when expanding internationally. So, how do you evaluate the financial impact of brand consistency nationally or internationally versus local adaptations? And what role does brand play in international growth?
So I think brand is critical. It's probably an undervalued asset because it's an intangible. Um, I, as a CFO, am thinking longer term. I'm not thinking short term, and I think that's a weakness that many backward viewing CFOs or even management teams are guilty of. Is that they'll expect a brand to have a short term impact. You take your product. They should love my product. The sales should be generated relatively quickly, in a matter of months or, at least a couple of quarters. I think that's a little bit foolish, to be honest. A brand does take time to resonate in a new market. I work with a product that had been around dozens of years, but it was new to the market. And so it takes time for people to familiarize with the benefits of your product or service. And so you have to take a long term perspective on this. You have to take a multiple quarter, likely multiple year perspective on this. You cannot expect a product or a service to resonate quickly in a matter of weeks, let alone months. It will take time. And I think that's as business people, we tend to want an impact. We want the product is there, it's on the ground, it's in the marketplace. We want to see traction. And I think that we're often guilty of falling into that trap of expecting that there'll be resonance. It took me a few weeks for my digital products on my stand store to generate inquiries. And I was like sitting there thinking, well, it's not working. But equally, you've got to be very careful not to what I call negotiate with yourself. So if a product isn't gaining traction in a marketplace in a short term period, I would be very cognizant not to start thinking, oh, we need to lower our price or we need to spend more on points of presence or marketing presence or Google Ads or whatever the mechanism for short-term boosting visibility is. I'm a big believer in that you shouldn't compete with yourself. So don't start dropping your pricing by 10% or 20% just to get traction in the marketplace. Hold your guns, build your resonance, build your brand presence in that marketplace. Make sure you're doing all the right things, talking to the right people, whether that today might be an influencer in country. I was talking to someone recently there. She's got her product into the hands of a soap opera person who is now the brand image of that product, and that took a little bit of time, but that actually was an inflection point. And you will see an inflection point when your product gains resonance and traction in the marketplace. It just won't necessarily happen tomorrow. And I'm very cognizant that a lot of business will start saying, well, we need to start offering 20% off our 4.95 offer just to get resonance. Well, then you're just competing with yourself and it's a race to the bottom. So I would suggest playing the long game on this as well. And I would encourage marketers and finance people and CEOs to build for the long term, if you will. You should be thinking 3 to 5 years. How is my product resonating in the market? Is my brand doing the right thing? Do I need to invest in the brand? And in most cases, that's probably the case. You do need to invest in the brand, however that is done.
To answer that question, how is it done? One strategy might be creating a sub brand to support market penetration. The UK brands may not resonate particularly well in a different location internationally.
Right.
Procter and Gamble are very famous for creating sub brands. It's the same product. It's just called something different in different places. And, that takes quite a bit of time and effort and energy to make happen. And so that needs to be on your radar in terms of, a potential tactic to enter a market.
I think that's a great point as well, and I did the same with I was selling two-way radios into markets in the Middle East and Africa, and we developed a sub brand that was about 50 to 60% of the price, but used basically exactly the same components. And it's just the kind of the Toyota, Lexus, Honda, Acura company. You just rebrand it as a lower cost alternative and leverage off that in terms of cost. It's not rocket science, and a lot of businesses should do that, should pare back the product, take out the high cost components, and it should be one of the first things you should consider, I think.
Absolutely. And I think on that, another tactic might be looking at the value proposition, look at the brand's core promise. It may need reframing, particularly due to local economic conditions, customer expectations, even regulatory frameworks. Certainly look at what your value proposition is. Does it fit the UK market? What is the product market fit in the US, in Dubai, in China, in Southeast Asia Pacific? Just tweaking a few words might be all that's needed, or creating a sub-brand entirely.
And the great thing about business is it's always changing. Change is a constant. So the marketplace, the environment, I mean, in the global economy in the last 30, 60, 90 days, things have changed an inordinate amount. And go back 2, 3 years, it's changed an inordinate amount as well. So you've got to be fleet of foot. You've got to adapt. You've got to adapt your pricing, your brand strategy, how you go to market. And that's the case in most markets. In some markets, they're absolutely not price sensitive. You can increase your prices in certain markets by 10, 15, 20%, and it makes absolutely no difference to the volume of product you're selling or services you're selling because they're just simply not price elastic. But you go to places like the UK and North America, people are very, very price elastic. So if you do put your price up, there are some exceptions to that. One of the ones I use oftentimes is a fast casual dining chain in the US called Chipotle. They've got about 30 stores in the UK. They put 8 price increases through in 2024. Absolutely no impact in terms of volume. Now, not many businesses can do that. The ones that can have built a strong brand.
You mentioned price elasticity there. It's certainly one of the big considerations when deciding whether or not to go international is looking at the market entry barriers that you might have to face. And every new market, it presents its own set of challenges. There'll be regulatory hurdles, there'll be competitive landscape pressures, there'll be customer trust. Do we trust this new brand coming into the market? All of these things can slow down your expansion plans. So marketing can certainly play a critical role in reducing some of those barriers by creating the brand awareness, establishing credibility, creating demand. So Rob, you've been there, you've done it, you've worn the t-shirt. What are the biggest financial risks businesses face when expanding into new international markets? And how can marketing help mitigate some of these risks and accelerate a company's ability to generate revenue in those new regions?
So I think one of the things we talked about earlier was about research, understanding the market you're entering. And I spend a lot of time in what's called the developing markets, in places like Saudi, Dubai, Egypt, Turkey, South Africa, and they have a different perspective of price. Selling a product into Africa at the same price as you're selling it into the UK is not really going to work. But you need to understand what's going on. You need to do market research. And I think that's one thing that is sorely lacking today in the marketing world is people who understand that you have to do research. And it's just not happening. People are just literally wading in knee deep, thinking it's the same market. You can do the same pricing, the same distribution strategy internationally that you can do in Western Europe or the UK. And it's just not the case. And you need to recognize through research what are other people do. I'm not a big proponent of looking at what your competitors are doing because your product is relatively unique and has certain attributes to it. I'm a big believer in looking at the value proposition of your product, what it's worth to the client, and aligning with that, doing your research in the market. A lot of businesses these days will just go into a market and just cut their prices by 30% and thinking their product is going to resonate. Well, that's just going to destroy your margins. You're going to spend the next 5 years trying to get back your margin. And one of the things that I hold very dear is the margins in my businesses do not go down. The margins in my businesses only increase over time. So all of my businesses, they'll have targets for gross margins. And if they're 35, we need to have a gross margin target of 45 in a period of time. Now, it's not going to happen next quarter, but one of the best ways to protect and expand margins, one of the levers we'll use, is price.
Absolutely. And it's not just price to consider. Yes, it's a very critical component of the marketing mix to flex, but I think you have to be cognizant that different regions require different entry strategies. So, for example, North America, it's highly competitive. There's a strong emphasis on brand differentiation and digital first engagement. Americans are leading the way with digital. So if you haven't got a differentiated brand, you're going to struggle. And if you're not digital first prepared, you're going to really struggle. I think with Europe, the challenge you've got is you've got lots of countries in Europe in a very small, compact piece of land. So unlike America, which is a big bit of land, everyone speaks the same language pretty much. In Europe, you've got to navigate, fragmented regulatory bodies. You've got to navigate language barriers, and you've got diverse customer preferences as well. It's completely different when going to Asia. In Asia, it's all about relationship-driven markets. Trust and partnership building is essential, and especially adapting to the local preferences and needs is crucial. And you mentioned earlier, Rob, the Middle East and Africa, massive continent. Distribution challenges are the big thing you're going to face there. And so making partnerships in local regions with local alliances, that's essential for distribution.
Yeah, I think that this is a really good point. A lot of businesses do treat, a lot of businesses are looking away from Europe currently and looking at newer markets. The important thing I think is not to treat them all the same. The US is not one large country. It's about 50 different markets, selling into Washington state as opposed to Florida, looking at California to Massachusetts. They're completely different. They're completely different. They have different local state requirements, different licensing, different product requirements. They are literally separate countries in just the same way that South Africa is a different country from Egypt and Singapore is a different country from China. You have to go in and understand those local markets, those local preferences, those local historical norms, those local products that are resonating, and develop marketing strategies, pricing strategies, distribution strategies for that market. And in that way, you cannot go with 15 or 20 markets. You have to pick your poison. Pick one or two states, pick one or two countries, pick a market. For me, in the Middle East, Africa, I picked three key markets, and that was Turkey, Egypt, and South Africa. It just so happens those were large geographical markets, but that was what resonated with the product we were selling into those markets. I talked to a lot of potential clients and clients that are moving into North America, and they always want to go to New York or Florida, but you have to pick the right market for your product. And in one case, I was working with holders for electronic devices that attach to things like boats, and the right market for them to enter was Connecticut. It wasn't Florida, it wasn't California, it certainly wasn't Texas. Obviously, there's certain markets you need to go to, but you need to pick the right market, and don't always pick the biggest market. Pick the right market that is right for your product or service, and therefore you need to do the research on that, because otherwise you're going to spend an inordinate amount of time and an inordinate amount of money finding out that that wasn't the right market for us, or that wasn't the right distributor, that wasn't the right strategic alliance. So do your research, get on the ground, find what other people are doing, don't copy them, do what you need to do, but pick your market and pick your pricing point.
I think that's probably a good point to close on. I think the key message there is do your research and do it well. Don't assume you know the market. Get out there, live it, breathe it, and be prepared to change your decision.
Absolutely.
So, if you've been watching or listening to this episode, I hope you found value from the discussion. In the next episode, Rob and I will be discussing how to align sales and marketing for revenue growth. So, stay tuned for that one. Rob, thank you again for giving up your time to share your perspectives. I've really enjoyed the show and look forward to the next episode. Enjoy the
Good
golf.
to see you, Paul. Take care. Cheers.